So this question here focuses on calculating the inverse function f minus 1 of x when we are given an original function f of x. Now, for this type of question, there are actually two techniques that we can follow, and I'm going to show you both of them here because, again, what we're able to do is make sure that we look at the two techniques and we think to ourselves, which one is easiest, which one do I understand the best, which one am I going to get right? And you pick the one that resonates with you the best. Remember, there's not one set technique for this. There are a couple. Key thing, understand it, get it right. That's what we're after. So let's split it here and let's do it. So the first one is to remember a relationship between the original function and its derivative. And that relationship is that if you take f of x, but you do f of the inverse f minus 1 of x, what that'll give you is the value x. So what I can do is take my original function, substitute in f minus 1 of x for where x isn't there, set it equal to x, and then change the subject to the inverse part there, and I'll get my inverse function. So what that means is, looking at this, that I get 2 over the inverse function f minus 1 of x plus 3 is equal to the value of x. So what I'm now going to do is jig that about. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by moving the plus 3, and I'll end up with 2 over f minus 1 of x equals x minus 3. What I'm going to do now is multiply both sides by f minus 1 of x, the inverse, and I get 2 equals the x minus 3 in a bracket, f minus 1 of x. Now all I have to do is get rid of that bracket, the x minus 3, divide through both sides by that, and I can get that the inverse f minus 1 of x is equal to 2 over x minus 3. So that there is the inverse of the function f of x, and I follow it using the relationship here, the f of f minus 1 is equal to x, which is key. If we state that, follow it through, there's technique 1, method 1. Second one is by making a statement to begin. What we do is we state that if y equals f of x, that therefore means that x is equal to f minus 1 of y. So what we're establishing there is that if I have an original function that depends on x, if I revert that function to make sure that my dependent variable from the original becomes the independent variable now, I'm going to have the inverse. Sounds like a lot of jargon, but actually what it means is it's quite straightforward, because now we can set y equal to 2 over x plus 3, and then similarly to what we did before, change the subject, but this time change the subject to x equals. When I do that, I can use my relationship from that statement that I've just made at the start to then replace it and get my inverse. So if I start with this statement here, what I'll end up getting then is y equals 2 over x plus 3. That can be changed to 2 over x equals y minus 3, simply by swapping the two sides round and then moving the 3 across, something we're easily allowed to do. What I'm then going to do is multiply it by the x, so I'll get 2 equals bracket y minus 3 times x, and then move the y minus 3 down to make x the subject of the formula, and I get x equal to 2 over y minus 3. Now I can go back to my original statement, because what I can do is if I imagine substituting in x for the f minus 1 of y, but knowing that I can swap the variables for x and y around as well, I can then write it as f minus 1 of x is equal to 2 over x minus 3. So I can make that statement now, and it all comes from the fact that I have made this statement here at the start, which is a vital statement to make if you follow that technique. Always start by writing that down, because that sets up the relationship between the two variables and between the original function and the inverse function that we're now establishing. Now a question like this is worth 3 marks. The marks are obviously worth different points in each of the two techniques. So for this technique here on the left, you get 1 mark for stating your relationship, f of f minus 1 of x equal to x. You then get your second mark for setting up the equation, so 2 over f minus 1 of x plus 3 equals x. Your third mark is then given as you work through, change the subject of the formula, and get to your final answer there. For the second technique, you get 1 mark for making your statement and then putting that y equals 2 over x plus 3. So both of these parts, by setting up the relationship between the original function and the inverse, and then stating the y equals 2 over x plus 3, you get your first mark. Changing the subject to x equals 2 over y minus 3 gets you your second mark, and then going back to your original statement and using that to write f minus 1 of x equals 2 over x minus 3, that gives me my third mark right there. Now, a key point to note for this sort of question here is if it wants you to state the inverse function f minus 1 of x, your final line must start with f minus 1 of x equals. If it doesn't, you haven't answered their question. You haven't given them what they're after as a final overall solution. And remember, we want to give them everything they're after to get every single mark that is available to us here. So, 2 techniques, 2 different set of steps. There will be one that resonates with you more than the other. I've got my preferred technique. You'll have your preferred technique. Just make sure you stick with what you know, stick with what you do, and stick with the steps that are going to get you all the marks. Remember, that's the vital part. Once you pick your technique, stick with it, follow it through, learn the steps, and you'll manage any inverse function question given to you at this level if you do that. It'll be easy peasy, lemon squeezy.